How you guys all doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege. Today, we got the first day of November. Welcome to the month of November. We're going to continue talking about Week 9 in the NFL that got started yesterday. And a big surprise quite honestly, because based on the preview that we did and everything, the Jets pulled out the win somehow last night in MetLife Stadium, 21-13 over the Houston Texans. We're going to talk about that here coming up on the show. Also, we're going to get to part 2 of our game picks for Week 9 as well. Also, in today's show, we're going to talk about the Cowboys once again and what Micah Parsons and Trayvon Diggs said recently on the recent episode of Micah's podcast that has some people talking about not necessarily what they said, but what they didn't say in their little conversation that they had. So that is coming up on today's show, plus much more later on. So make sure to stick around for that. And before we get started here, if you guys want to get involved with the show in any way that you'd like, any questions, comments, or just any opinions you'd like to share, please don't hesitate to drop it in the chat box. We thrive on your energy and insights. So if you want to make it absolutely sure that whatever you say, whatever is on your mind, gets featured on today's show and I read it out loud, there's an easy way to go about that just by using the new Super Chat feature, available just by clicking the $ at the bottom of the chat box as you see. And this way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we always appreciate it whenever you guys are able to do that. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking, and hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show interactive, conversational, and please make your thoughts heard in the chat box. I'm always interested to see another point of view or just answer any questions. So that is that. But like we said, talking about the game last night, we had a pretty good one to start Week 9, a team that desperately needed to win, and another one that was not necessarily needing a win, but still in the same breath, they were dealing with their own adversities, right? The Jets took on the Houston Texans, and, it seems like Vegas knew something about this game that most people didn't know, because the last few days I saw that the Jets, pretty surprisingly to me, were the favorites going into this game, and I don't really want to hear anything about them just being at home. So they're the favorites. They're 2-6. They just came off of a loss to the Patriots. There's no way they should have been favored in this game, but they were. That's what most of the betting sites had it on, and I'm pretty sure it stayed like that up until game time. So that was obviously there for some reason, and I thought there was 0% chance that the Jets were going to come away with the win. I just thought it was impossible, just the way that they were playing, the recent run of form, and just how everything was just not going right for this team to kind of start the Jeff Ulbrich era and really go all in. Nothing was panning out like it should have. But, they did win 21-13, the New York Jets did, over the Houston Texans. And that snaps now their 5-game losing streak that the Jets were on to go to now 3-6. While on the other side, the Texans dropped to 6-3. And not only dropped to 6-3, but from the start of this game, they were the number 2 seed. Now that loss drops them down to number 4 for the time being, and the Steelers are actually the number 2 seed, right? Who would have thought? Who would have thought the Steelers, led by Russell Wilson, would be the 2 seed right now? But yeah, that's what the outcome was, and this game was pretty odd, and not too exciting to start because one, the game started off pretty slow. There was, I want to say, there were 6 punts in the first 8 drives of this game, 2 fumbles, 1 by each team, and just very ugly football to see. There was a lot of boos coming down, and yeah, you were really wondering, or I was left wondering, were the Jets going to figure something out, like pull something out of nowhere, or were the Texans going to find something in their young receivers? Because there seemed to be a struggle there, obviously, right, on a short week, trying to get accustomed to new receivers that you really haven't been throwing to, how that was going to work. And that was related to the biggest piece of news, right, going into this game with the Texans losing Stephon Diggs for the entire season with that torn ACL, obviously not having Nico Collins back yet. And it showed last night, definitely, the stalling out of drives, just not being able to punch it in. Having those two guys out certainly was a big miss. While the Jets, on the other hand, their star duo, Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson, really showed out and really showed everyone what we came to expect when Davante Adams came over, right? We saw 2 touchdowns by Garrett Wilson, having a great game, 2 great catches, right? The one-handed catch was, or both one-handed catches were great, but the second one was just out of this world. And Davante Adams scored his first touchdown as well, and he got things going. There were some moments, though, while I was watching the game where I'm thinking, like Aaron and Davante look like they're not on the same page for however long they've been playing with each other, pretty much playing the same offense. I don't know how much Todd Downing has put his stamp on things, but there was a couple plays where, one in particular, where I saw Aaron trying to throw a back shoulder throw to Davante, and Davante sort of like blocking or just not knowing that the ball was coming to him, and Rodgers showed a little bit of frustration there. But they got it going in the second half, much like the rest of the team did. And it's great for them to finally get that touchdown out of the way. Now it feels like, if you're really optimistic about this situation, that the floodgates could open here for a bit. But Aaron Rodgers, here before I read out the stats, had a pretty bad start to this game in particular. Both teams weren't good, but Aaron really was stinking up the place because he had a career worst half performance in this game. He was 7 of 14 for 32 yards, and those 32 yards were the lowest amount of yards he's thrown in a first half. Previously, it was 37 back in 2015 against the Broncos, but today, or last night actually, it was pretty bad. It was very bad to start the game. But overall, Aaron Rodgers finished a solid 22 of 32, 211 yards, 3 touchdowns in the second half. He was only sacked 2 times, which we're going to get to. But Breece Hall also put his stamp on the game, 74 yards on 15 touches. And like I said, Davante and Garrett. Davante, 7 receptions, 91 yards, and a touchdown. Garrett, 9 receptions, 90 yards, and 2 touchdowns as well. They dominated the targets. Davante got 11 targets. Garrett got 10. And it was just basically the Garrett, Davante, and Rodgers show. Breece was in there here or there, but really it was those 3 guys that were taking over. And then you look at the Texans and look at a struggling team with CJ finishing 11 of 30, 191 yards. He was sacked 8 times, which was pretty surprising. And, no surprise, though, with Joe Mixon. He had 106 yards, another touchdown, 24 carries, which we're just becoming accustomed at this point. Tank Dell finally had that breakout performance, 6 receptions, 126 yards, but no passing touchdowns. Just that one sole rushing touchdown by Joe Mixon was the only time the Texans came near the end zone in this game. And looking at how this game sort of played out here a little bit, it was a bit strange, like I said, a bit dull to start, but the first score, or what we thought was the first score, came in favor of the New York Jets when rookie Malachi Corley had that little jet sweep. He got into the end zone untouched, but he forgot the ball. Had to cross over the goal line, and he dropped it as soon, as he thought he was fully in, but the ball wasn't. So he dropped it, it rolled out of the end zone, and instead of being up 7, the Jets gave it away, and it was a touchback. At that moment, I'm thinking, that's just the way the Jets season has gone, right? You think you got an easy touchdown, and then the worst possible scenario happens. And I thought from that point on, they were gonna lose this game pretty easily. But credit to them for sticking around, even though they fell back in the scoreline when Joe Mixon scored the first touchdown. They were up 7-0, and after an opportunity for the Texans to almost go up 2 scores, but they missed the field goal to take it into halftime at 7-0. The Jets scored 3 times in the second half, like I said. each team only had 3 drives, so the Jets scored on all 3 of their drives. Why did each team only have 3 drives? Because each drive was so long for each of these teams. There was no drive that was less than 8 plays for each of these teams. But unlike the Texans, the Jets capitalized on all of them, scoring touchdowns, while the Texans just really found it a struggle to convert on these opportunities. Plus, they had a missed field goal by Kaimi Fairbairn as well. It hit the top left upright, and it just completely flipped. While the Jets just took off in the second half, the Texans just kind of got more stuck in the mud. And, Garrett stole the show. Adams finally got over his little slump to start his Jets career. But when we talked about the pass rush for the Texans against the pass rush for the Jets, we thought that it was going to be Will Anderson or Danielle Hunter really getting after Rodgers. But it was the opposite. And that's pretty worrying to me, just because this offensive line for the Texans, I knew was a problem. We pointed it out, but I didn't think it was going to be this bad. I think you can make an argument that it's getting worse, and it could get worse because their starting left guard, Kenyon Green, really struggled in this game. I saw one play where just Quinnen, in like a matter of 2 or like a second and a half, just pushed him directly back into the lap of CJ and just took CJ down. And then his rough night continued when he got hurt. CJ just fell on top of his shoulder, and now it was reported that he's going to be out the rest of the year. So how's that offensive line going to look now with one of their starters now being out? Even though he might have been not playing the best, he's still a starter, right? So we talked about that, and the Tank Dell situation, he got better. He played a very good game. Hopefully that continues for them. But really, my biggest takeaway from this is for the Jets, to get a win, that's awesome. They're going to pretty much essentially run the table to try and give themselves their best chance at the playoffs. But for the Texans, this combination of bad O-line play, where CJ's just getting sacked very quickly, and receivers outside of Tank Dell that can't really get open fast enough, is a bad combination to have. That's one of the worst scenarios you could have. So that might be my inclination that they could be going out and trying to get another receiver, just based on what we saw last night, because they're 5-3 or 6-3 right now, excuse me. I don't think they're gonna lose the division or anything like that, especially because they already beat the Colts twice. But it is something you can't just take lightly. And if you have an opportunity to get a Kendrick Bourne, KJ Osborne, or a Darius Slayton, I think the Texans, from what they saw last night, should go ahead and do that. But it was a great night for the Jets. They got their win. They stopped their 5-game losing streak, and we'll see where they go from here. Because Garrett and Devontae, when they're hitting like that, it's really hard to stop this team. So if they stop shooting themselves in the foot, they could have a little bit more optimism here to hope for something later on in the season. But for right now, they're just going to live off of this win for a while. They have an extended break here before they play again. So in the meantime, we're going to get to our next segment of this show, and we're going to get to part 2 of our game picks for Week 9. We have 6 more games to get to, and we're going to discuss our thoughts on them, the storylines, and what will be the deciding factors in this game to decide which team will win. So we'll be right back. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. my mind? Is everybody in the world blind?
We are back now on the Chip Shot Football Podcast here to get to part 2 of our game picks that we left off of yesterday. We went through 6 games yesterday, went through all of that, and now we got part 2. Again, specifically for time reasons, I think this works out best. So, without further ado, just jumping into the matchups that we still haven't talked about, I have them on here up for you guys to look at as we go through our game picks. So, as we typically do, starting in the top left-hand corner, one of the more intriguing games that we have this week, right? The Cowboys traveling to Atlanta to take on the Atlanta Falcons. Mike Zimmer actually in a matchup against his former quarterback in Kirk Cousins over there in Minnesota. Both of their times there coincided, so that'll be pretty interesting, especially because they're on either side of the ball. How does Mike Zimmer defend against his old quarterback? Should be a fascinating matchup, especially because on paper and from just what we've seen from both of these two teams, the defense that Mike Zimmer's been running hasn't been very good, quite honestly, and Kirk Cousins, on the other hand, he's been the missing piece for the Atlanta Falcons. So can Mike Zimmer stop the role that the Falcons offense is on, or will the Falcons continue to roll and put more pressure on the Cowboys with a pretty disappointing season up until this point? And, the Cowboys, looking at them a little bit here, they just suffered their first loss away from home this past week when they traveled to San Francisco. Now they're on the road again, and we'll see if that now becomes a trend for the Cowboys, or if they go back to performing pretty well on the road, for as weird as that sounds. And the Falcons also just came off of a big week too, because they beat the Buccaneers again for the second time this year. So they swept them this year, and the Falcons now hold the sole lead over the NFC South in the year so far, halfway through the year. And also they've won the last 4 of their last 5 games as well. So they're starting to find their groove here a little bit here. They're more settled in. Kirk, I think, after getting some butterflies out of the way, the first couple games are a little bit uncomfortable, but now it looks like he's really blossoming into what they envisioned. And just quickly here for the Cowboys, they're expected to be without Deron Bland again, and I'm pretty sure I saw Micah Parsons was ruled out again. So 2 big name players on their defense missing again. They've been making do without them, but this is the point in time now in the season where you'd like to get those guys back. And, it's only a matter of time now before they come back. But this game would have certainly helped out a lot, especially for, like we said, the Falcons being so heavy on offense. And really both defenses aren't necessarily shut down top 10 sort of defenses. The Falcons have struggled stopping the run, and they're allowing, I want to say, around 24, 23 points per game. And we know the Dallas Cowboys defense. We don't really have to mention too much about that. But with all those variables obviously now on the table and picking a winner from that, I'm going to go with Atlanta. Because even though their defense might not be that much better than the Cowboys, it's still something. It's still on the other side of the ball for the Falcons, where they have a very good running game, and the Cowboys don't really have that to combat the Falcons' defense, right? The Falcons can hurt the Cowboys with their running offense, with both of the guys in Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson, obviously. So I'll be pretty interested to see how they manage that balance. Are they going to go fully in on committing to the run, or are they still going to be pretty balanced when it comes to the pass as well? So with that, I'm still going to pick the Falcons. Also the Cowboys' offense is too dependent on CeeDee Lamb. The Falcons could realistically double or just even have one other guy other than the 2 guys they already have on CeeDee Lamb just looking over and peeking at CeeDee, and I think they'd still have a great chance to win. Whereas the Falcons are a lot more diverse. You got Darnell Mooney, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, even Ray McLeod. These guys, Kirk's slinging the ball all over the field. So it's what the Cowboys don't do either. So I'm going to go with the Falcons in this one. Then moving on to a not so exciting matchup, a 2-6 Patriots team going up against a 1-6 Tennessee Titans team. And it's it's two losing teams, obviously two teams that might not be aspiring for much this season, but it is interesting just from the fact that the quarterback situation for both of them is kind of flipping between the two guys. We have Will Levis. He was limited in practice the last couple of days, so will he be healthy enough to play, or are they just going to stick with Mason Rudolph? He's been doing pretty well for them. Calvin Ridley has really shown out with Mason Rudolph in there, so not to mention also Will Levis' struggles, right, obviously. So where do their sort of allegiances lie there? Are they just going to commit to Mason or just go back to Will? And for the Patriots, it's a little bit more set because they went to Drake May when both of them were healthy, but he hasn't cleared concussion protocol as of yet. So will it be Jacoby Brissett in there? And we might have two quarterbacks, two veteran quarterbacks going at it, or are we going to have possibly the two young quarterbacks or one or the other for each side? That'll be really the most interesting part of this game to me. No offense, but both have lost, 4 of their last 5 games. Calvin Ridley, like I said, has been looking better, so that'll be a challenge for the Patriots defense. But, with this going forward, based on what I saw just last week from the Patriots with their defense and their offense with that running game of Ramondre Stevenson, I'm going to go with the Patriots here because I liked what they did against the Jets, and I know you might say the Jets might not be the greatest win, but, still they have a lot of great players. Great players that the Titans don't necessarily stack up with too well. So I like the Patriots. They're coming off of a good win. And if Drake May does play, he has looked pretty settled in for as far as rookies go in their first couple starts. So I'm going to go with the Patriots. They'll stack some wins here. They'll get their second win in 2 weeks here against the Tennessee Titans. Then in another game that features a rookie quarterback, or quarterbacks in this game that are very similar so far, because we have 2 Lincoln Riley coached former Oklahoma quarterbacks, former first overall picks between Caleb Williams and Kyler Murray in this game. Very similar paths to get here. Caleb obviously finished it off in USC, but Lincoln Riley has been a huge influence on both of them. They both were at Oklahoma for the time being, even though Caleb, like I said, went over to USC, and they were both picked first overall in the draft. So both of these situations are a little similar just based on the quarterbacks, but also they're very different, obviously, in stature and play style as well. So with that being the case, I believe just in this case individually, I think Chicago's defense will cause a lot of problems for the Arizona Cardinals, especially if Jalen Johnson, who isn't talked about enough as a top corner, takes away Marvin Harrison Jr. And then at that point, it gets a little dicey because I know Trey McBride's very good, but is he going to have like a 10 reception kind of game or something like that? And is that going to be enough to win for the Cardinals? And the Bears' run defense too is very good as well. So James Conner, he's been doing pretty solid, but if they're really stout against the run as well, I think there will be some struggles here where Kyler could be running for his life back there and could lead to some inadvertent throws. So because of that, I like Chicago in this one. Their offense has been good enough. The last week wasn't indicative of that just because of how ugly that game was with the Commanders, but they have good players. The Cardinals defense isn't great either, so I like Chicago here. They get some retribution, and quite honestly, this was a game where if they don't win this one, I don't think they're going to win many games afterwards, so they need this one to win because the rest of the schedule for the Bears is absolutely brutal. So I'm going to go the Bears here on the road in Arizona. Then the next game, switching over here to the right side, not that easy to pick. I'm going to go with the Eagles. Doug Peterson's return to Philadelphia, though, that'll be pretty interesting. But overall, this Eagles defense is really starting to impress me. They're starting to play like I kind of envisioned them to. Maybe not lights out yet, but Jalen Carter's making plays. The guys on the outsides, Josh Sweat and Bryce Huff, are starting to finally turn that corner, literally, and get to the quarterbacks. And that's leading the turnovers, right? They had a pick on Joe Burrow last week. They forced the fumble as well. So I like what this defense is doing now. It feels like they're playing a bit more loose out there, and they're flying all over the field. Also on offense, the identity of Kellen Moore is starting to come through. Jalen is looking a little bit more comfortable. He hasn't had a turnover. He's playing a lot cleaner, a lot more polished with the football as well. So also the biggest deciding factor is that the Jaguars' pass defense is arguably the worst in the NFL. So AJ, Devontae Smith, they're probably going to have a day on Sunday, and in Philadelphia as well. I expect the Eagles to handle this one pretty easily and move on from there. Speaking of moving on, we have another great game here between two divisional opponents. Extremely close division, right? We have the Cardinals actually leading it at 4-4. The Rams are 3-4. The Seahawks are 4-4, and the 49ers are 4-4. So, these games really do matter already for this division because it's so tight, and because this game's so big, it means the loss of DK Metcalf is going to be even more, greater than it originally was, because DK has been ruled out for this game, and with the Seahawks being on a bye next week, he's not going to be back for a couple weeks, right, until they come back after their bye. So that is a huge loss, obviously, because their run game isn't the most consistent in the world. They usually abandon it pretty quickly, which I don't really like about the Seahawks. So with the Rams, I'm very high on the Rams. I'm extremely high on the Rams. I think they're going to win this division, quite honestly. And, there was a scare with Puka in yesterday's practice. He left it a little bit early, but Adam Schefter from ESPN said that it isn't presumed to be anything serious. So if they're healthy, this Rams offense is just as good as anybody, I believe, in the NFC, with Kyren, Puka, Cooper, and Matthew Stafford, of course, right? Their offensive line's only getting better. I'm really high on the Rams. So with a guy like DK missing out, I think the Rams are going to win this one. The Seahawks will drop to 4-5, and the Rams will move up to 4-4. So that is the second to last one. And then lastly here, to wrap it up, we have the Colts taking on the Minnesota Vikings. Joe Flacco, his first game as the official pronounced starter for the Indianapolis Colts after they benched Anthony Richardson. And, looking past all of that, this is a very close game, I presume. I think it is going to be close because you have the Vikings coming in on a 2-game losing streak, back-to-back games to quite fairly to Detroit and the Rams. Those aren't bad losses, but still, it revealed a major concern with their passing defense. And of course, now you have Joe Flacco coming in, who has nothing to lose. He'll just sling the ball all over the field. He's averaging 238 passing yards in only 3 games. And with Flacco, the Colts have scored 27 points per game as well. So it doesn't really stack up well with what the Minnesota Vikings really, their strengths and weaknesses are. And but also on the other side, Indianapolis, where the Vikings can hurt them, their run defense is one of the worst in the NFL as well. So if they could get Aaron Jones going, hopefully, they can convert some of these drives that they go up and down the field on, convert them into touchdowns, because that's bitten them in the rear end over the last couple of weeks. So if Aaron Jones can get it going, this will be a more favorable matchup for the Vikings if they're able to do that. But with all that being said, I'm going to go with the Colts. I'm going to go with the Colts because this is the typical game where the team makes the quarterback switch, and right after, the next game after, they look like a whole different team. They look like completely rejuvenated. Everyone's making plays. The quarterback looks fantastic, and everyone the next day is going to say, oh, like Joe Flacco, he's done it again, right there. The Colts are serious contenders. I feel like that's always the case when these quarterback changes are made. So it might be a surprise. It might be an upset. But I like the Colts in this one. I'm not really too sold on the Vikings pass defense yet. And not to mention that, with Joe being able to place it anywhere on the field, they also have Jonathan Taylor that the Vikings have to worry about. So it's something that I think it'll be too overwhelming, and the Vikings don't really convince me too much of consistently scoring throughout the entire game. So I'm going to go with the Colts. I think the Colts surprised a lot of people here and remind a lot of people that they are really going in on this season to try and win as much as they can. So those are all the picks now officially for Week 9. We'll see how accurate we are when we return on Monday. But for the time being now, we're going to get to a couple more segments here. We mentioned what CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons were talking about recently on the latest episode of The Edge, which is Micah Parsons' podcast. They had a lot to say on the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and they didn't include their own quarterback on their list. So stick around to find out what they said, who did they consider the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and whether or not this is a big deal or not. So we'll be right back when we return after this break.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Jumping back into the action now on the Chip Shot Football Podcast here, and before we get going on any other latest news on the field regarding football, we had to bring this up because I thought this was very interesting on Micah Parsons' podcast, right? Recently, he had an episode, and I think like usual, he has Trayvon Diggs on, and they got to talking about a bunch of different stuff, and the topic of quarterbacks came up. I think just talking about Jaden Daniels and how great he was playing this season, and, you know, based on that, they got into ranking their quarterbacks. But before we get into that, just overall, the Cowboys clearly have had a lot of problems, right? Leading to them being 3-4, you know, the defense being one of them. The offense, you know, they've been all right, but really not living up to the standard that a lot of people had for them. And for me, I place most of the blame on Jerry Jones, just for running it back with this same roster that disappointed last year, I should say. And not only that, running it with the same group of guys, but losing a lot of starters along the way. And the fact that he felt so confident and tried to sell everybody on this idea that they were going to run it back with the same group of guys, the same coach that just got their butts kicked in the first round of the playoffs again, and trying to make it sound a little bit more exciting by saying that they're going all in this year. You know, it's been very disappointing from that standpoint, and that's why I blame most of this on Jerry Jones, but others, you know, would point to Dak Prescott, claiming that he's not been very good, especially now that he's been paid as the highest paid quarterback in NFL history and currently in the NFL, obviously. You know, a lot of people are putting a lot of blame on him for how he's played, coming off of an MVP season, getting paid, like I said, and everything like that. But you didn't expect that to come, or that sentiment to come, from his teammates. And that's where we can get to this topic here, because Micah Parsons and Trayvon were talking about the quarterbacks that were balling so far this year. And specifically, they mentioned, or they brought up Jaden Daniels, you know, being in the same division and all, and how great he's playing. But, you know, I think Trayvon, based on how I remember the conversation going, because obviously I can't show it, you know, Trayvon was talking about Jaden Daniels, and Micah basically asked them to name the top 5 quarterbacks right now, or name the guys that would be in that group with Jaden Daniels. And, you know, Trayvon threw out Lamar Jackson, Patrick, Matthew Stafford, Josh Allen, those guys, right? And on top of that, on top of Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar. They mentioned Jared Goff. Micah Parsons brought up Jared Goff. Jalen Hurts was another name that Trayvon Diggs brought up. He was really chiming for Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford was someone that caught Trayvon Diggs' eye pretty much. They were talking about Jaden Daniels already in that group, and they brought up even Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold for the job he's done. In all respect to Sam Darnold, he's done very good, and I'm pretty sure at one point in this season, I thought Sam was playing like a top 10, top 5 quarterback, but I think now it's kind of sizzled out a little bit, and those are a lot of names to go off of. I think it's almost 9 names that they rattled off there, right? Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, Jalen Hurts, Jared Goff, Stafford, Daniels, and Sam Darnold. 8 names. They got to 8 names, and they never brought up their quarterback. And a disclaimer, something to think about, obviously, right? Usually when things go like this and you name your top 5 or anything like that and you're an actual player, usually players are pretty cautious about it, or they're very like hot and cold about it, right? Because they'll usually say something like oh, I don't like doing this, or there's so many people, right, we could name. And the Micah and Trayvon named a lot of players there, right? But what's funny is that they didn't include their quarterback. And obviously they don't play against Dak, right? That could be something that's in their mind, but not necessarily needed to be said, right? They need to pick the top quarterbacks who they've played against, right? So they could just think in their own mind or anything like that and think, all right, well, we're not going to include Dak in here, right? That could be fair. That could be an accurate depiction of what happened in this scenario. But usually what I think is crazy about it is that they never brought that disclaimer up, right? Their own disclaimer, like saying, all right, we'll name our top 5 quarterbacks, but obviously we're going to go with Dak, right? Excluding Dak or something like that, right? Because obviously we're gonna go with our quarterback. So that's the craziest part about this to me. I don't really think they meant it as a slight dig or anything like that, an unintentional dig at Dak Prescott. I just feel like it just happened naturally in conversation, that they really didn't even think about it. They were just thinking of guys that they played against. So naturally, Dak wouldn't pop up in that conversation. Or, just like teammates, it just went without saying that obviously Dak, they were going to exclude him because he's their teammate. So that's where kind of my level of panic or attention to this kind of topic ranges from. But it's not like they were really lying, right? Because we look at Dak so far this year, and he hasn't been good. I think Dak will even tell you he hasn't been good, because so far through the year, he ranks 9th in the amount of passing yards he's thrown at about 1,800 yards. He has a 63% completion percentage, though, which is in the bottom quadrant, bottom third of the NFL, at 23rd overall, or 23rd ranked in the NFL. He has 10 touchdowns on the year, which is 13th so far, and he's thrown 8 interceptions, which is tied for the second most in the NFL. And those numbers don't suggest top 5 quarterback, right? Obviously, but especially over the last 2 games, because over the last 2 games, Dak has an even lower completion percentage at 59%. He's thrown 2 touchdowns and 4 interceptions in 2 ugly losses over the last couple of games. And, I think Dak would agree that he hasn't been playing well right now, just based on the record alone, right? I'm sure they've asked Dak a bunch about what more they could do, and like we know Dak so far, just based on how he responds to things, he'll put it on himself first. So I think this isn't too far out of the realm that Dak would say that he isn't playing great right now at the moment either. But just as a side note or anything like that, to not mention Dak in their rankings is a little bit funny and just odd that they haven't mentioned it like that, like a little disclaimer, like I said before. But I think it's important to point out too that they're not losing solely because of him, right? But he's got to make better choices. Obviously, a lot of the offense, a lot of what he decides out there on the field dictates how the outcome turns out, right? So he needs to do better, obviously, of limiting the turnovers. He's thrown some pretty bad ones recently, so he needs to clean that up. And really, because of the makeup of the team, there's so much pressure on Dak that he has to be so close to flawless each and every game to give them their best chance of winning. Because if he is throwing interceptions, then they really have nothing to kind of look to and think, or at least we have this going, right? They can't rely on their run game because it's not there, right? They haven't gotten anything from it all year. So Dak really bears all the responsibility, bears all the blame and all the praise too when they do win. When he has a great game and they win, or when he's throwing these interceptions too and they're losing, right? He is so pivotal to them winning and losing that he has to play better, quite frankly. But the Cowboys also haven't done a great job of helping him out in that regard, right? Bringing in some more weapons or bringing in a capable running back, right? We're going to circle back to Derrick Henry. So even the defense as well, not having a defense to be compatible or just be complementary to what they're doing on offense, right? When you usually have an offense that's struggling, it's because you allocate a lot of the attention to the defense, making sure that's 100% and top of the league. But, both sides are really not doing each other any favors. So that's what's so unfortunate about this, right? Dak definitely deserves some of the blame, but the Cowboys haven't done much to help him out in that regard either. And even, let's say Micah and Trayvon were actually trying to kind of throw out there like an unintentional sort of dig at Dak Prescott, right? Like he really hasn't been playing good and they think that's a big reason why they're not winning. Even if they were to feel like that about Dak and they just let it slip out like that, it doesn't really matter. Honestly, it doesn't matter what anybody thinks really of Dak because Dak's going to be there. Dak's there for the next 3 or 4 years, really, because they locked him in. They gave him this new contract at the start of the year. And, Dallas has to do whatever possible now to surround him with the best talent, the best support around him. Because, quite honestly, Dak, from what we've seen, in the regular season, he's been great. He can't put up those numbers. But when it comes down to it, the Cowboys, from what we've seen from Dak and this team over the last couple years, the Cowboys around Dak, surrounding Dak, they need to have a top 3 defense like they have in the past, a top scoring offense to give themselves the best chance to win some of these close games. And over the last couple of years, even that hasn't been enough, but that gives them their best chance. Dak, to me, I think at this point, I'm ready to say that he's a quarterback that you win with him on your team, not really because of him, right? You don't win games because Dak elevates everybody else and he plays phenomenal football. He's a great quarterback, but I don't think he's capable of doing quite literally everything to drag the Cowboys to a win, right? Like other quarterbacks that are obviously there, like Patrick, right? Josh, Lamar, those kind of guys, right? I don't think Dak fits into that group. So the Cowboys really have failed in both regards, right? Maybe paying Dak this amount of money was a mistake, but also not surrounding him with enough help is another mistake that they're just going to have to deal with. And it doesn't matter if they like him, if they think he's all for anything like that. They've already paid him. So to avoid really looking bad and regretting giving this contract to him, they need to just forget about how they're feeling and try to improve this roster to get the best out of Dak and kind of validate this contract. So, that's what my thoughts were on this whole situation. It was kind of weird that we got it here before game week, but quickly I wanted to kind of give my top 5 here for the quarterbacks because I think it is interesting based on who we have in the top 5 right now. Just quickly, my top 5 at this point would be Lamar, Jared Goff, Josh Allen. I think all 3 are the top 3 favorites for MVP. Jaden Daniels, I would include in there. I think he's played to that level so far. And I'd include Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow wasn't really included by Micah or Trayvon either. And just based on how he's performing, just himself, not really the team, he's playing like a top 5 quarterback. If he wasn't there, this Bengals team probably has maybe 2 wins or something. He's been playing very well, but it's been everywhere else, in my opinion, that kind of has been letting Joe Burrow down. So, there was other guys in there too. Hurts, Baker, Patrick is in that other group, Kirk Cousins as well. I think those guys are all clumped together, but the top 5 to me are Lamar, Jared, Josh, Jaden, and Joe Burrow, in my opinion. So far, we still have a whole other half of the year left, but it is interesting to see Micah and Trayvon point that out. So we'll see how the Cowboys go off of that. Maybe Dak shuts a lot of people up this week. Who knows? And beats the Falcons on the road. We'll see how that goes. But for the last couple segments here, I wanted to bring up a topic on contenders so far in the NFL and pretenders, because we're halfway through the year. We're going to shuffle through each conference and shuffle through the top 8 to 9 teams right now in terms of playoff seedings, and label them contenders or pretenders based on what we've seen so far through the year. So we're going to start off with the NFC conference when we return in just a couple of moments.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the Chip Shot Football Podcast here on a Friday to start the month of November. We're going to shuffle through a list of contenders versus pretenders so far in the NFL. I wanted to wait usually to the midseason point to kind of get to the updated MVP and all the NFL Honors Awards, updated ones, and also to talk about, either on whether or not we believe these teams are for real, in other words, or, are pretenders, right, in the other category. So, to me, how I wanted to deem these teams is just based on the fact on whether or not I believe they can get to a conference championship. Not just make the playoffs, not just, finish the year off on a good note or just win their division or anything like that. Can this team make it to the conference championship? Are they built enough to do that? And do they have the capability of beating other good teams along the way? So that's kind of how I made the determination on whether I deem them contenders or pretenders, just so you guys know, just so you know it's not just based on playoffs or anything like that, because, a lot of teams are going to make the playoffs, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're really contending for much, right? It'll be a success if some of these teams make the playoffs all in all. So without further ado, we're going to start with the NFC like you guys see, and we're going to start just from top to bottom. The number 1 seed in the NFC are the Detroit Lions. Pretty easy. They're the biggest contenders, honestly. They probably have the best shot to contend for a conference championship, for definitely a Super Bowl out of anybody in this NFC. I think I'm pretty confident in saying that so far through the first half. They're just overwhelming on offense, right? They're overwhelming you with their run game. You really, at some point with this Lions team, I'm watching some of their games, and at some point, you just want them to stop running the ball at you, right? You just want them to stop averaging 4 to 5 yards per game. And because you focus so much on that, then Jared Goff, boom, hits you with a little play action, and he completes every single throw in the game. And they do a very good job at it. They do a very good job of executing on what they want to do. Jared Goff is playing at an MVP level. Their defense is getting by right now without Aiden Hutchinson. I still think they need to make a trade to really lock in this bid to really contend. But, clearly they're at top of the NFC and top of the NFC North division. So they're if I were to pick a team to represent the conference, it would be the Lions. So they are major contenders to at least make the conference championship, like I said. So from them, we go to the number 2 seed right now, which is actually the Washington Commanders. And to surprise some people, they're pretenders to me. They're pretenders to me just based on the criteria, guys. They're based on the criteria. They're a great team. They're doing very well right now. One of the best teams, one of the best stories in the NFL. But do I think they're going to get to a conference championship? I don't think so. Just in their first year, I think that would be too good to kind of just work out, and all the dominoes would have to fall so perfectly in line for them to make a conference championship, right? They already dealt with an injury. Jonathan Allen is out for the rest of the year. Who's to say? Hopefully it doesn't happen, but dealing with injuries and dealing with the playoff atmosphere, atmospheres, right? Later on in the regular season, and then once you get to the playoffs, not everybody has really been there. I'm not quite sure if Terry McLaurin has been there or any of these other veteran guys. I know Bobby's been there, but Bobby Wagner, but other players on this team really aren't accustomed to that. So to have everything fall perfectly for them to make it to the conference championship, I think they still need another wide receiver. They still need better players in the secondary, and they've been bested by some pretty potent offenses like the Buccaneers and the Ravens so far this year. So I think it'll catch up to them a little bit in the playoffs. They might, at most, I would give them the divisional round, and even still, that would be a great season. So making a conference championship, I would say that makes them pretenders in this case. I don't think it'll happen in year one. And then the next team we have on here, the Atlanta Falcons, in the third spot in the NFC so far. Their offense is looking great. They had some duds, though, with the game against Pittsburgh and Seattle. And adding Kirk Cousins has obviously enhanced this entire offense immensely. Their defense, though, is still struggling. They're averaging 24 points per game, allowing that amount per game. So I think I'm not quite sold on them yet. I like the addition of Judon. I like the addition of Justin Simmons to go along with Jesse Bates. But I think just in some games where it's so heavily based on the offense, right? If this offense for the Falcons doesn't show up, they really don't have a chance to win, right? Because their defense isn't built enough to withstand and hold other teams to like 17 points or something like that, right? If their offense isn't putting up at least 20 points, they're going to lose. So that's why I think being so heavily determined and so heavily just dependent on is the word I was looking for on offense, I think that'll come back to bite them in the playoffs. So I think there's another team again that I think could reach the divisional round. So in that case, I have them as pretenders. But, they're building something good in Atlanta so far. So they're not going to just be done. They're still going to continue to build on this thing. And the next team we have on here, surprisingly, is the Arizona Cardinals. They're actually the 4th seed in the playoffs right now. They're leading the NFC West at this moment at 4-4. But I'm not going to kid you guys.